I lost my virginity at the age of 23 in this basement apartment. It's now a flower shop called Bloom, next to a salon called Shag. I always felt like a late bloomer, sex-wise. I wasn't exactly waiting until marriage, but I did buy into the whole bestowing my precious gift on a magical true love special someone thing. I didn't want to be pregnant or slutty, so I waited and waited for the right man. When it finally happened, it wasn't so much because I had found Mr. Right, but because I had grown tired of waiting for him. So I said screw it, and I had sex with the very unspecial guy that I was dating. Afterwards, I realized the two things I'd believed for certain were totally wrong. I didn't look or feel any different. And I can't believe this was what all the fuss was about. Given all the buildup, I expected, I don't know, something a little more momentous. But it was more like a guy put his penis into my vagina and poof, I was no longer a virgin.
The erect penis enters here, and rhythmic movements, a pumping back and forth, causes an ejaculation from the penis.
Virgin. The word is loaded with cultural baggage. It colors our view of female sexuality, rites of passage, tradition, taboo. It's been 50 years since the sexual revolution, and we're still being told that how and why the penis enters the vagina for the first time will somehow change and define us for the rest of our lives. Why do we give virginity so much value and meaning? What's behind the power of this elusive, mysterious, and not always so precious gift?
We hear girls talking about this idea of being technically a virgin. So we wanted to kind of look at what is this obsession with being technically a virgin? Why? You know, it seems like almost more important these days to be a virgin than it was 15 years ago. I don't know, the girls just seem to be really conflicted about it. So that's why we wanted to ask them, what does this mean? And of course, we got a million different types of answers.
Everybody get out a piece of paper and write a definition for the word virgin. And we'll talk about those in a minute.
Bronwyn Pardis is a sex educator who works primarily with young adults. I asked her if she and her students could define virginity for me.
You know, it starts out simple. Someone who's never had sex is a virgin. Okay, great. What's sex?
My definition of sex is
vaginal intercourse.
Intercourse. An exchange of feelings and emotions,
intercourse,
passions, and bodily fluids.
No, not intercourse. I think I group in like oral sex.
The first time you actually make love to someone.
I don't believe that a woman can lose her virginity to another woman.
You play with yourself, you're not a virgin.
I feel like it has to be with someone else.
Any form of lust.
Or there was different type of virgins, like, you know, an anal virgin, an oral virgin, and the three virgins.
In my pre-internet preteen years, I tried to learn about sex at the local strip mall, reading penthouse forums that a friend stole from her brother. There were 4 bases, and going all the way meant losing your virginity. Today, it's called swiping your V-card, and you can find pretty much everything online. But is the information any more accurate? How would I know I was doing the virginity thing right if I didn't exactly know what it was?
If I masturbated, did I lose my virginity? If I have sex with my girlfriend and I'm a lesbian, do I have a virginity in the first place? If I was raped, you know, that's a really big one. Am I still a virgin?
Heather Carina is the founder of the teen sex ed site Scarletine, which gets 30,000 visitors a day.
Almost every day, some variant of the question, you know, it's either he only put it in for a minute, or it was only in like this much, like it was in like a half an inch. Does that count?
If we're going to define virginity as heteronormative, vaginal penetrative intercourse, and then I lost my virginity when I was 15.
We have people signing virginity pledges, many of them feeling that oral sex and anal sex is not sex.
If I want to define virginity as a state of mind, as early Christian theologians did, then I probably lost my virginity when I was like 7.
It stops being about what choices you make, and it starts being about what you call the choices you make based on what you want to say about your virginity status.
When a boy grows up and is ready to be a father, he is able to put his penis into the vagina, that special opening that mothers have.
Penis and vagina intercourse is one kind of sex, and most people, if they're not thinking about it, will define virginity as not having had that kind of sex.
From a queer perspective, if you got genitals rubbing against genitals, you're fucking. And this idea that something has to be in and how far does something have to be in, especially when you're talking about lesbian sex, again, that's fucking.
It's just interesting, the idea of penetration is the definition of it, and it just is obvious that it's because of the patriarchal society that was defined that way. And I think that at one point it probably needed to be defined that way. But it's just not necessary anymore. And I think that's where there's all this confusion now. Like, what does it really mean?
Hannah Blank is a historian who used to answer virginity questions for Scarlettine. But she had no solid definitions for virginity either. Her search for one became the book, Virgin, The Untouched History.
You can't weigh virginity on a scale. You can't send in a virginity-sniffing dog. You cannot take a picture of it. There are no stamps commemorating virginity. You know, it's possible to be a time in a person's life before which they have had no sexual experience with another human being, and a time after which this has taken place. And we have felt historically a need to organize people, women specifically, on before and after.
This is modern-day America. Why is it so important to know if you're a virgin or not? What are we really talking about when we talk about virginity? Here are some of the basic messages. There's boy virginity, and there's girl virginity. Take the word itself. The root of the word virgin is the Latin virgo, which also means young woman. When it comes to virgins, there's one burning question. And that's about a vagina. Has this vagina ever had a penis in it? That's because issues around virginity have been overwhelmingly about women and intercourse. Historically, a woman rarely had any property or rights of her own and had to be attached to a man to survive. In fact, a woman was property, transferred from father to husband when she got married. Her husband had to make sure her vagina was sealed in its original packaging, so that when she had a child, he'd know he was the daddy. You don't want to be raising someone else's kids, let alone leaving them your estates. The rape of a virgin was a huge crime, namely the destruction of property. In a very twisted version of you break it, you buy it, the matter would be settled by having the rapist simply marry his victim. A woman who was even suspected of not being a virgin could be cast out or even killed. No one wanted to be known as the father of a slutty daughter or a secondhand vagina. While all women had value placed on their bodies, how those values were determined depended on the body. Female slaves, for example, were considered subhuman and hypersexual, and not afforded the notion of purity. Their owners weren't charged with rape because sexually assaulting property was not a crime. And because black women's virginity was worthless to masters who profited from the sale of their children.
The exercise of defining virginity is not at all merely a philosophical exercise. It's very much about real, palpable, tangible policing and control of bodies, specifically women's bodies. You always have to ask the question when you see an apparatus of control like this, who is at the reins, who is doing the controlling, and who benefits from that control being done?
I, like every good Southern Baptist girl does, made a promise that I would remain a virgin until I got married. Now, I do have an admission to make that at the time when I made this promise, I was 15, I had no idea what any of these things were, but it sounded really horrible and it was going to send you to hell, so I certainly didn't want it, and so I took this pledge.
I commit to not have
sexual relations with anyone until I'm married. And that is my personal commitment to God, to you, and to the man that I do not know yet, but that I will marry.
Shelby Knox was the subject of the documentary, The Education of Shelby Knox, which chronicled her efforts to get comprehensive sex ed into her Texas high school. I first heard about abstinence pledges from her film, and I've been following Shelby's career ever since, as she's traveled the country talking to young people about sex.
The pastor who would come into my public school, he would pull this girl up on stage and he would like have this really dirty, nasty toothbrush and he would say, "Would you brush your teeth with this?" She'd look at it and go, "No." And so then he'd pull out another toothbrush and it was in its box and he would say, "Well, would you brush your teeth with this one?" And she'd go, "Yeah, sure." He'd say, "Well, if you have sex before marriage, you are the dirty toothbrush." Your sexuality belongs to your male God, to your male pastor, to your male father, to your supposed future male spouse. And there's no sexual autonomy in there at all.
Growing up in Indiana, Ellen Westberg also took a virginity pledge, and she kept it until her wedding day.
My dad was an assistant pastor at our church, and we were in church all the time. I remember going to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. One advantage of Christianity, especially fundamentalist Christianity, is I always felt safe, and I think it's because of that bubble. I remember being given a chart. It kind of gave you this timeline for a relationship, and then based on that timeline, like where the body could be touched. And it was like week 1 or like the first 3 or 4 weeks, you just held hands. When you're raised in that mentality of don't have sex before marriage, it inadvertently makes sex this huge thing. I mean, everything is toward that point. I really believe that the only reason I got married so young was for sex.
Who gives this woman to be wed? Mother and
I was 22 and he was actually 21. We were technically virgins when we got married. It never went in the hole. But we did everything else. We would mess around completely naked. We had tons of problems before we got married. And I remember thinking, once we get married and we can have sex, like everything's gonna be okay, you know? So we go home, like dress hits the floor, I'm on the bed, no kissing, no foreplay, like nothing. I have no idea what lubrication is or what it's for or how it should be used. And he was pretty well endowed fella. And it felt like surgery without anesthesia. Like it was the most intense pain I've ever felt, and tears were streaming down my face. It took about 1.5 years probably before it stopped hurting, and even then, like occasionally it would hurt. And I hated sex. I was pissed. I was like, this is what everyone's been talking about. This is what I waited for. This is what I planned my life around.
How did Ellen's wedding fantasy and her lived reality end up so far apart?
I pledge from this day forward to embrace purity of mind, to embrace purity of mind.
Here in 21st century America, purity balls keep ancient traditions alive. A girl as young as 7 or 8 years old basically hands over her virginity to her father for safekeeping, until he gives it to her husband on her wedding day. It says so, right here in the pledge she makes. Jessica Valenti is the author of The Purity Myth, and she's fascinated by the ways our society links a young woman's worth to her sexuality.
When you saw the pictures and you saw the images of these girls with their fathers and the way they were dressed up, they looked like little wives. And the language that was used in the Virginity Pledge was also really disturbing. There was a lot of talk about ownership over girls' virginity, fathers talking about covering their daughters, which I believe is a biblical term, but it just sounded very incestuous.
I here pledge to protect my daughter.
I here pledge to protect my daughter. And at some of the events, they give their dad a little pink box with a lock and key in it. And people said, well, you know, what about boys' virginity? Isn't boys' virginity important too? So they started integrity balls. It's not about ownership or I'm pledging my virginity to my mother or it's important for me to wait because that makes me a virtuous man. The language was, I shouldn't have sex because that's someone's future wife or that's someone's daughter. So you don't want to do damage to someone else's property, really.
Many purity balls do double duty as fundraisers for crisis pregnancy centers, whose goal is to prevent women from getting contraception or abortion. Even if they don't attend a purity ball, 1 in 6 American girls takes a purity pledge. Ceremonies for girls as well as boys happen not only through churches, but at public schools all over the country. There's even a Facebook page where anyone can pledge purity simply by liking that page. And of course, there's an app for that. Many pledgers get rings that say things like "True Love Waits." And purity rings were central to marketing pop stars like Miley Cyrus, Selena Gomez, and Jordan Sparks.
All right, I just have one thing to say about promise rings. It's not bad to wear a promise ring because not everybody, guy or girl, wants to be a slut. All right, so anyway.
Symbolic items are targeted to girls who don't want to be sluts, like this rose pin that says, "You are like a beautiful rose. Each time you engage in premarital sex, a precious petal is stripped away. Don't leave your future husband holding a bare stem."
The abstinence-only programs that are in the schools, they're not scientifically based. They're based on fear. There's a lot of misinformation.
Since 1996, the U.S. government has granted over $1.5 billion to schools that teach abstinence-only sex education. Despite government studies showing the programs are ineffective, they continue to receive $50 million taxpayer dollars every year. To receive this funding, schools must teach that sex before marriage will have harmful psychological and physical effects, and they're forbidden to teach about birth control and disease prevention.
Kids may delay sex for a little while, and ultimately they will have sex before they're married, even though the program's told them not to.
We know that many of the people that choose to sign the virginity pledges, when they choose to be sexually active, they're much more likely to be involved in sex without the use of a latex condom.
Comprehensive sex education will discuss abstinence and will also let you know how to prevent pregnancy and STDs and other negative consequences of sex.
These same abstinence messages follow young people onto college campuses.
Studies have shown that a lot of people who engage in premarital sex have future problems in their marriages, and also, of course, STDs and pregnancy. We think that traditional marriage between a man and a woman is the appropriate place for sex.
Rosemary Ims heads up publicity for True Love Revolution, Harvard's official campus chastity club.
Did you register? Can I have your name, please? We encourage gay people also to be chaste because we think chastity is a very important component of preserving your own self, identity, your emotions, etc.
Would they be chaste until they could get married in a state that allows gay marriage?
Well, we don't believe that gay marriage is valid marriage.
Oh, so then their chastity would have to be lifelong?
Yes.
What did you think would happen to you when you lost your virginity?
Once you do it, you're gonna be, oh, you're gonna keep doing it, you're not gonna stop.
You have to wait until marriage because if you lose it, you're not gonna, and nobody's gonna wanna marry you.
You're gonna be called a slut. Oh, the first time you do it, you're gonna get STD because you're not being smart about it.
It's very important to get, a blessing from God before, do anything sexual with anybody.
They say that you're gonna become slutty.
Women are just a lot more sacred, we're a lot more delicate, and we shouldn't just be passed around from man to man to man.
Supposedly when you, start having sex, your hips get bigger.
Though I never received any formal abstinence-only education in high school, I practiced my own unique brand of it by developing crushes on pop stars and on jocks who didn't know I was alive. I was a nerdy, artsy teenager who was totally awkward around guys and almost never dated. I was too embarrassed to talk openly about sex, but I did plenty of independent study. I pored over the joy of sex while I was babysitting, looked up all the words from the hair song Sodomy in the dictionary, and I read lots and lots of Judy Blume.
Judy Blume, God bless you. I know that there are so many women like myself that would have grown up and probably had a baby and still not known where it came from.
Welcome to Abiola's Kiss and Tell, the March edition.
I've known Abiola Abrams for years, and I've always admired the way her multimedia programs make talking about sex really normal and fun.
All I remember about sex education was a woman standing there with a banana. She unrolled a condom onto a banana, and that was pretty much it. And I was like, but how do we get to the banana? What I talk a lot about is an empowered sexuality, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to sleep around. Maybe you do, and that's fantastic if that's what you choose to do. Maybe you don't. This next generation of young women coming up, there doesn't seem to be a lot of choice in what they think that they can do with their own bodies.
Young women are growing up thinking that you have two choices. Abstinence-only education is telling you, not to, and Girls Gone Wild is telling you how to. It's really very much the same message, that your sexuality doesn't belong to yourself, that someone else is there to tell you what to do with your sexuality.
There are some girls who believe that literally everyone is having sex, so they better do it, otherwise they are missing out. Other girls perceive themselves as being thrown into this den of sin, this culture of constant pole dancing, and they need to hold out to maintain their purity. They see themselves as rebels in a way.
My name is Judy, and I am a virgin. There you go.
This is Judy Kang, a Juilliard-trained violinist. Unlike many of the women I've met, her conception of virginity goes far beyond what you're not allowed to put where.
It's not just a physical thing. You can be just as impure without actually doing the physical act. If it's done in your head already, in your heart, you're losing your sense of keeping things kind of holy and pure. I belong to God, and my body belongs to God, and my life belongs to Him.
Judy spent the last year and a half traveling the world.
Recently, I've been on tour with a major pop artist. Her name's Lady Gaga. I don't know if you've heard of her, but we've been traveling pretty much all over the world. I have it shaped on both sides, but I usually have a design, so I'm gonna get that done in a couple days. I have a little, she's a lamb, actually.
I see more tattoos.
Yeah, I have a few. The feeling of being on stage, it's surreal almost. It's such a spiritual experience for me. It feels like I'm not really there 100%. Like, I'm physically there, but somehow I'm not always 100% in control. I love that, having that freedom and letting something else kind of come in and inspire me. It's a great feeling.
How can you be touring with the most sexually provocative pop star on the planet?
I know, right? Yeah, that is the question. I hang out with everyone on tour. I don't, keep to myself and study the Bible in my room all the time and pray. My human nature, my flesh, has struggled and said, I want to experience it. But God's been teaching me a lot about myself. If there's any place He wants me to be, it would be here, because it's like the ultimate. It's like, I'm exposing you to this, so let's see where you go with it.
Is religion the only reason people wait to have sex for the first time? It certainly wasn't my reason, and it's not Sarah's either.
Hi, I'm Sarah DeMiro, and I am 30 years old, and I live in New York City. I am a comedian in the city, and and I'm also a virgin. I've never had the sex, ever.
Sarah created a blog for Jane magazine about her search for a Mr. Right to lose her virginity to. It caused a media sensation.
You've seen Hollywood's 40-year-old virgin. Now meet TV's 29-year-old virgin.
And the guy's like, "See, you're a virgin."
Calling all men, she could be yours.
So what am I waiting for?
So I went on a bunch of these dates and I wrote about it, like for a year. Like a no sex in the city.
This building is an all-women's residence, like bosom buddies, Peter Scolari, Tom Hanks. This is my floor, institutional. See the hand railings for the older folk. Come on in, I'll give you a little tour. This is, okay, my bed. Also my living room, family room, dining area. You can't have guys here though, that's the one thing. You cannot have men in your room. One guy went on a date with me, and after the end he walked me home, and I go, "Well, this is it, you're not allowed in." He's like, "If you don't like me, Sarah, just tell me. You don't have to make up stories."
So people are fascinated with someone that decides not to have sex, and they really look for that thing that's wrong with you. Like, she's not fat, she's not Mormon. It's always Mormon. It's never religious, it's Mormon. They couldn't do it, but they think it's really powerful that I did. Yeah, and then you get the sense in your head like, wow, this is like, I'm a superhero. I'm a virgin superhero. I could do anything. I'm a virgin not because of God or because like my parents or like whatever, but because I just was really dorky growing up, all women's education, really insecure. And when I go through the whole thing about being a dork, they're like, "But you're fine now. Well, you could have sex now." I'm like, yeah, but I want to, meet someone I like. 30. I want it to be good. But I've met a great guy, and I haven't had sex with him yet. I think it'll mean more to me no matter how bad or good or horrible or terrific it is. It'll mean something to me because I met someone really special.
There can be something very empowering about saying no to sex. Historically, many women became powerful specifically because they remained virgins. The Vestal virgins were responsible for the Temple of Vesta, the goddess of Rome. At a time where almost every woman got married, they had to be unmarried virgins. It wasn't about being pure, though. It was about being autonomous and not ruled by a husband. Broken vows meant a death sentence. But after 30 years, they retired rich enough to never need a husband to take care of them. And nuns traded husband and family for their own kind of autonomy. They avoided the fate of so many other women dying in childbirth. And until recently, it was one of the few ways that a woman could learn how to read, learn a trade, or be in charge.
A membrane partly covers the entrance to the vagina. This is the hymen, or maidenhead.
My mom thought you're not a virgin when you have your hymen broken, and she thought putting on a tampon would make me lose my virginity.
I've been told that females, lost their virginity from such things as riding horses, being in a car, hitting a bump.
Like when you see the blood and stuff, like that's how you define when a girl is not a virgin anymore.
When I was young, I heard that an intact hymen equals virginity. That idea continues to be perpetuated, from tampon ads to the vampire community.
I can't believe I waited so long. We were gonna do it every single night, whether you want to or not.
Jessica was an abstinent Christian girl before she was turned into a vampire and had sex.
Stop.
Okay. Is that blood again?
Because of the innate regenerative properties of vampire blood, or something, her hymen kept growing back after each time she had intercourse.
It's gonna be beautiful. Every time will be like our first time.
It'll hurt like hell. I'm a fucking deformity in nature. I'm gonna be a virgin forever.
The thing is, the connection between hymens and virginity is about as mythical as vampires. Trying to tell if a woman is a virgin by checking her hymen would be like checking a guy's penis to see if he's ever had sex. It doesn't tell you a thing. A hymen is just what's left over when you make a vagina.
The vagina has a moist lining called the mucous membrane.
Like on a cheap plastic toy, when there's a little plastic left over on the edges? That's actually what a hymen is.
You have different types of hymen. Some hymens looks, very thin. Some hymens look very thick. Some hymens have some holes in them.
Henia DeCock was a gynecologist before she went to work for the United Nations.
Some girls would lose their hymen very easily without even noticing. The hymen could be also very elastic. Some women will not lose their hymen until they deliver.
The hymen wasn't even discovered until 1544 by an anatomist named Andreas Vesalius. But checking hymens to test virginity is just part of a long history of searching for proof of something that just can't be proven. Many of these tests were based on the belief that when a woman had intercourse, she was opened up down there, creating a sort of an open channel up through her throat, so that if you sat a woman over something smoky and could smell the smoke on her breath, she wasn't a virgin. Another test had a woman smelling a head of lettuce, and if the lettuce made her pee, she wasn't a virgin. I asked Hannah Blank to demonstrate a virginity test that's been sealing women's fates for at least 400 years with just one piece of string. She's measuring my head and then comparing it to the circumference of my neck. And if the neck measurement is larger, well, you get the idea.
I am afraid that your neck has expanded past the black mark on the string by about this much. So you're that much of a non-virgin.
Oh, okay. All right.
The string doesn't lie.
Sweetheart, we have to talk about this.
Okay. Sorry, Ed.
Now that I think of it, I probably shouldn't have let my boyfriend watch from behind the camera. The absurdity of these tests reminds me of the way women were tested to see if they were witches. Equally absurd, but also devastating if it came out wrong.
If the girl is not found a virgin at the night of her wedding, it's a shame for her family. She could get killed. Girls will pay money, and their families will pay money to make sure that there is, some sort of a bleeding happening at the night of the wedding. In this situation, you do one stitch between the two labias. They will have 2 drops of blood, and both families will be happy and so on.
Our collective anxiety about the state of the vagina has spawned an entire industry. There are hymen reconstruction clinics in the heart of Manhattan. Amazon sells creams to tighten the vagina. And you can buy an artificial hymen on the internet for $30. I ordered one. It's just a little piece of plastic a woman inserts into her vagina. And during intercourse, it releases some red dye to simulate blood. Despite the fact that it can cause infections, it's a bestseller in China. The longer I waited to have intercourse, the more nervous I got. I was worried it would hurt, I might bleed, I might get pregnant or get an STD, and it didn't even occur to me that I might enjoy it. But in total opposition to those things, I also believe that the power of sex would bond me so intensely to my partner that I should choose very carefully. Where did I get the idea that the penis was some kind of magic wand that would transform me forever?
There are 2 competing narratives. The loss of virginity is going to be painful and traumatic, and that simultaneously this is somehow supposed to be the best sex you're ever going to have in your life. Call me crazy, but I sense a bit of distance between these 2 concepts.
I think a lot of young women who feel like they need a man for their sexuality to be ignited don't see themselves as full human beings. And sadly, that's the point. That's what they're supposed to feel.
It circles back to that whole mythology that, that having sex somehow foundationally changes your being. And that there's that thraldom and that connection, that inevitable connection with the first person who penetrates your body.
Isn't this just the story of Sleeping Beauty? A passive girl who can't become a woman until she's sexually awakened by the right man.
This is a woman, this is a vagina, who is also a woman, who has been necessarily asleep, sexually asleep for her entire existence, because how could she not be? If women can only have proper sexual pleasure by being penetrated by a penis, then that is the gesture. A lot of queer people have been thinking about this and talking about this and talking about, okay, so if you're not talking about penises and vaginas and potential of reproduction and babies and all of this, then how do you decide whether you've lost your virginity or not.
It's coming of age quick. Having girlfriends, having boyfriends, it just really wasn't something that came up. I didn't wait to have intercourse. It was just, we were doing lots and lots of other things for many years. I remember actually when I did go ahead and had like penis and vagina sex, I kind of made like a little bit of a big deal about it because it did seem like you were supposed to make a big deal about it, and I like told 3 people, but it was interesting for about 10 minutes.
It's going to be really heteronormative, it's going to be really patriarchally oriented, and there's not going to be an alternative schedule of losing your virginity because that's not what it's about.
My friend Megan Curry is transgender, and she began her transition from male to female just a few years ago. I was curious about how she thinks about virginity loss.
I was thinking back to my first time. I was 19, I think so was she. Probably my most profound moment as a young man, my most honest moment as a young man, was not being able to get comfortable. I didn't feel as though I lost my virginity that night. I always wanted to feel what she was feeling. And throughout my life, I wanted to feel what the women were feeling. It's been about 6 years since I was in a sexual relationship with someone. And I know that it's going to be completely different when I enter into a relationship again. I'm really looking forward to that. The operation may not come for another couple of years. And so, what do you do when you're a 50-year-old virgin? What will virginity look like as a female for me? What will my next experience look like? What will it be, and how will it make me feel, and how will it affect the rest of my life? I find now that I am mainly attracted to women, and that makes me a lesbian, but you know, there are some men that turn my head too, and so I don't know. I'm really confused. I'm probably more confused than most people are about the labels. I just think that in order to lose my virginity, I have to be with a man. Why is it always about penis in the vagina? And that's what's disappointing for me. It's always, I used to think that virginity was about new experiences. I used to think that maybe virginity was about love, experiencing love as a woman for the first time, you know, openly at least for the first time. And who knows, when it comes time, maybe I'll feel a completely different way. Because I do believe that it's possible to lose my virginity to a woman. You know, I know it's not going to be living up to my expectations. I know I'll romanticize it. I know that I'll fall into all the traps. But I want to know what it feels like.
Megan is thinking about her virginity in a more complex way, and she's not the only one.
I actually lost my virginity twice. I lost it or gave it up as a teenager. And then I was a born-again virgin in my 30s. I dated one person my entire 20s. Afterward, I had to, again, I guess, lose or give up my virginity because I was new to the whole sexual game. I was new to dating. I was new to interacting as a sexual being with new men and flirting, and so it was definitely like a born-again virgin experience. Now, I haven't been sexual for a while, and it's because I'm waiting for the right partner. And when I do have sex again, yeah, it actually will be quote-unquote special, and not because the harps are going to play or I'm going to march out in a white dress or anything, but because it's not something that's part of my everyday existence, meaning sex with another person. Sex with myself all the time. That's a different thing.
When I was a freshman, I had sex for the first time, but I was with this guy for a number of months before, you know, I decided this was something I was comfortable with, and we did so many other things, and like things that I know a lot of people who have PMD sex would not be comfortable doing. In reality, you know, even though I was a virgin according to society standards, I've done some
things that, you know, the rest of society would consider like varsity level sex.
Even though I went to a pretty liberal high school, there was this assumption that nobody was having sex, and if you were having sex, you were kind of weird. But then when I got to college, there was the assumption that everyone was having sex. Isn't that strange? And it's really, literally like one summer is different. I don't think everyone lost their virginity in one summer. It's pretty incredible.
I thought it was great that these young women were speaking so openly about sex. But there was one puzzling thing. I had spoken to girls there who weren't sexually active, but they didn't share any of that with the group. Were they just too embarrassed to admit to being virgins? It felt like, depending on where I was, women were either not supposed to talk about having sex or not supposed to talk about not having sex. I spent my 4 years of college as a deeply closeted virgin, and I was convinced that I was the only virgin in any art school anywhere. It wasn't until I started blogging about virginity a few years ago that I realized how many people out there felt the same way. When are you too old to be still a virgin? And if more people were honest about it, would it be such a stigma? I came across a blog called Confessions of a Virgin and got in touch with its anonymous author. Happily, she and her boyfriend agreed to come out of the virginity closet to talk to me about their relationship.
My name is Brita. I'm 24 years old. I currently work as an au pair.
I'm Dan Fleck. I'm 25, and I work as an engineer repairing petroleum storage tanks, which is pretty exciting.
We're both on OkCupid.
I saw her profile. Very obvious that you were intelligent and had good grammar.
I think of myself as a technical virgin because I haven't had the penis and vagina sex.
I have participated in a wide range of physically pleasing activities, but the one that I'm saving for marriage is penis and vagina sex.
We have a nerdy sex life.
The first time I ever took off a girl's panties, I may have had Google there to help me find a clitoris. I mean, it's kind of elusive, and, you know, a diagram is helpful.
Most things I've done have been with Dan.
Well, you got to start at first base.
Lots of above-the-waist fun.
I really enjoy giving massages.
We have been completely naked together.
Oral sex.
He's gone down on me. I've gone down on him. We have watched each other masturbate on Skype.
Skype sex is wonderful.
For a while, I was just waiting to be in love. But then I decided that I really just wanted to have one thing that was only shared with my husband.
Say you do get married, and it's your wedding night. Right, so tell me, what is it going to be like? What is it going to mean?
I think it'll be a special moment. It'll probably feel maybe a little bit better. I don't have any, I think, unrealistic expectations of, oh my gosh, I'm going to stick my penis in a vagina and it's going to be glorious.
I think that it will be really nice to actually feel him inside of me. We'll have that emotional connection, like that extra step, but I don't want it to hurt the first time.
I thought we were going to do the cast a penis kit.
Well, we did talk about that.
And you know, like any scientist, you got to first figure out before if it fits.
Exactly, I know. And so we might have to start with like a smaller dildo though, and like work our way up.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
It took me 6 years to work up the courage to actually go through divorce.
After Ellen got divorced, she didn't have sex for years. Is it true that her first time totally traumatized her out of ever wanting to have sex again?
The first time I had sex with someone other than my husband, I fell back in love with sex. Or I fell in love with sex for the first time. Like, to know that it could feel good, it was awesome. And I remember thinking, saying out loud, you know, that I could go the whole rest of my life and never have it again. And to feel that, that's just foolishness, made me happy.
What do you think is the right number of partners that a guy should have in his life?
To be honest, I don't think there's a number, a limit. For guys, for females, I can say the most is 5.
So if a girl has 10 partners, 20 partners?
Well, if it's like more than like 25 at least, then yes, I think
it really matters a lot.
And if a girl has more than she can count on one hand, then she's a slut, etc., etc. But I think it's the same for a guy. I mean, I would call him a man-ho, but...
If he's like up in the like, oh, you know, I slept with 30, 40 women, it's like, okay. I think for a woman, I mean, I would hope, 20, but in any sense, the less, the better.
So if I told you that I'd had 30 partners before I got married?
I would say, you know, I hope your husband, you know, he doesn't know. Yeah.
I may have been a late bloomer, but I've been making up for lost time ever since, staying happily single into my 40s. But then, to pretty much everyone's surprise, while I was making this film, I fell in love and got engaged to Ed, the very man who watched me fail my virginity test. Back when I was 6, I wrote this book called The Story of Teresa, in which I gave a lot of thought to my wedding. It went into great detail about my future husband and my dream wedding dress. There's a part of me that can't resist indulging in that 6-year-old's fantasy of what I'd look like in the big white dress. I'm going to check out David's Bridal, the industry leader and the only place that actually stocks dresses in my size.
Where are the big girl dresses? Oh, here they are.
It's clear to me that I'm not just buying a dress. I'm buying into a whole fantasy, where on my wedding day, I'm transformed into a princess, preparing to cross a magical threshold, shedding my old life, and becoming someone shiny and new. Like, dare I even say it? Oh my God. Hi.
How are you feeling?
It's a little weird, I gotta admit.
It's the strangest feeling to first try on your dress.
Uh-huh.
It really, really is.
It feels like I'm contained in some sort of apparatus.
I know, it's beautiful though.
I was asking Emma if this makes me look virginal.
You are virginal in it. That's what happens. When I first tried on the dress, I'm 50 and I've never been married, and during training I tried on the dress and I said, oh my God, I feel like a virgin.
Why do you think you felt that way?
Because I never had a wedding dress on in my life, and I think, you know, virgin, white dress.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So do you think that I could fool people?
I think so. You know what, you gotta have the look though.
Oh, I don't have the look?
Yeah.
I have to work on the look?
Professional, but have a look.
Okay. So tell me, does this dress make my ass look innocent? I got a little carried away and spent the next 2 hours trying on dresses. Then I snapped out of it. Why should I even give the illusion of virginity and symbolically erase my sexual history, even if it's just for a day? My sexual history is something good I'm bringing to this marriage. So, what does this white dress mean? To me, it feels like a throwback to those historic marriage transactions. Just like taking your husband's name or being given away by your father. I left the shop without buying anything. No one even wore a white wedding dress until Queen Victoria did in 1840. Women usually just wore their best dresses for their weddings. But by the 20th century, I guess the symbolism became irresistible. Maybe as women became more sexually active, they had to go out of their way to emanate chastity on their wedding day.
Men do expect that you've had some sex, but they don't want to talk about it. They kind of still want to have the illusion somehow that you were kind of not a virgin, but that you had a kind of a semi-chaste past.
With women, there's this sense that we only have so many times we can have sex before we go bad. And if you use it all up, you know, in your 20s with a bunch of different dudes, somehow, you know, if you decide to get married later on, your husband is going to run out of supply.
What happens if you don't even pretend to be semi-chaste? When you talk about your sex life as if you didn't know it was something to be ashamed of. This is Lena Chen. She was a sophomore at Harvard when she began writing her blog, Sex and the Ivy. Her first-person accounts of what she calls her college sexcapades and misadventures acquired a huge following, partly because it described a life many on campus were also living, but not talking about.
I got a lot of media attention for being apparently the only Ivy Leaguer willing to go on record about their sex life.
Lena was invited to debate Janie Friedel, who was then the president of True Love Revolution, Harvard's abstinence group. For some people, it was literally a virgin whore smackdown, but the debate actually focused on common ground, how they were both being defined and judged by their own sexual choices.
Well, actually, Lena and I were joking about me starting a blog called Chastity in the Ivy.
That wasn't the way most people saw it, though. For many, it came down to who would you rather marry, the virgin or the whore? When the debate was covered by Ivygate, commenters repeatedly called Lena a whore and a slut and assured her men would much rather marry someone like Janie.
I guess there's just a lot of assumptions involved when you encounter someone who is writing about sex openly, because presumably the only people who are willing to do that publicly and openly are people who are sexual deviants.
Soon after that, an ex-boyfriend posted explicit sexual photographs of her. The images were forwarded and re-forwarded all over Harvard and beyond. The invasion of privacy was so devastating that Lena took a leave of absence. Lena was not brought down by all the sex she was having, but rather because of the public harassment over it, carried out by people who felt her openness about her sex life made her fair game. We've all been someone else's idea of a slut. Even being abstinent doesn't give you immunity. A conservative youth group surveyed 1,600 men about things they thought were immodest in a woman. 93% thought miniskirts were immodest. 61% said bending over was a problem. And 48% of guys gave wearing a purse diagonally across your chest the thumbs down.
A woman doesn't have to have sex to be called a slut. The only criteria for being called a slut is that one's sexuality or one's perceived sexuality is threatening to some onlooker.
White guys think that black women are promiscuous and that they are assuming that you then just don't want to be that. You know, like you don't, like, because they are, you feel like, well, they think already that I'm a de facto slut because I'm a black woman.
Slut sometimes means fucked a lot of people. Slut sometimes means you had sex that you liked.
I like to think of Eve as the very first woman to be slut-shamed. Eve wasn't brought down by the forbidden fruit she ate. It was the subsequent shame in her loss of innocence that was her punishment. It was as if God himself had posted her naked photos all over the celestial internet as a lesson to every other woman who wouldn't follow orders.
Well, Eve was a little slutty. There's the sense that she gave into temptation, so she's become this paradigm of sluttiness. What she really wanted was to know stuff. The woman who wants to know, who listens to someone saying, here is some knowledge, and says, oh, knowledge, I would like some of that, please, is the slut. And obviously the Virgin Mary is the lady who sits there and she's very good.
Mary is the most powerful virgin of all. She's a virgin rock star, loved and worshipped the world over. The submissive and obedient Mary was a corrective to the unruly Eve. And that tension between them continues to influence attitudes about female sexuality to this day. The virgin whore dichotomy classifies all women into two totally distinct groups: ragingly promiscuous or completely pure. It's like that game people play, like Betty versus Veronica, or Ginger versus Marianne, or even Taylor Swift versus Taylor Swift, playing both sides in the very same video. And who gets the guy? Why, virgin Taylor Swift, of course.
It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
A what?
Well, if you say you haven't, you're a prude. If you say you have, you're a slut. It's a trap.
The ideal virgin whore fantasy is a 2-for-1 proposition, to be slutty and innocent at the same time. It's an unattainable mixed message bonanza that continues to sell everything from good old abstinence to pop stars.
I think that the perfect example of be sexy but don't have sex is someone like a Britney Spears, who, you know, everyone loved when she was, you know, the hit me baby one more time in the schoolgirl outfit, and she was like the virginal little girl that everyone could obsess over and think was very sexy. But once she became more of a woman and had kids, then all of a sudden she was hated and really vilified in the media. All of that kind of like pop sexuality, I think, is very much packaged in girlhood, and I think a lot of the porn culture is very much packaged in girlhood. You know, like the ideal woman is not really a woman, she's a teenage girl.
I didn't have to look very far to see this idea taken to its logical and lucrative extreme: virginity porn. This multi-billion-dollar industry includes titles like Pigtail Puppets, Virgin Cheerleaders, and First Timers. So I hopped on a Virgin Airlines flight to Los Angeles to visit the genre's leader, Barely Legal.
I don't really know what to expect. It's my first porn set. This is the first of their 2-day shoots for Barely Legal 82. I'm told that even if we haven't seen 1 through 81, we'll still be able to follow the plot, which is good.
This is Erica McLean, Barely Legal's director and producer.
Why do you not listen to me? You know, I mark down what I'm going to do. These are the people who I'm going to use today. If they look young, then it's okay because it represents the first time, as long as we keep them really clean looking. I think, you know, anywhere from 18 to 21.
That's nice. It's a little
It's
big,
authentic.
but like I said, it's going to be coming off anyway, so.
Yeah.
These are the famous Barely Legal white panties. It is our signature.
We're all required to wear
We're all
them, too.
required to wear the white panties.
Okay. If you work here, I'm barely legal. You have to have the white panties.
What does it mean? Tell me what the white panties mean.
You know, it's kind of that fetishy, kind of kinky thing where it's that pure
Young.
image, young. And turn around. Cute. I like these, I think.
Oh,
Just
it's full
And they're the
bottom.
full bottoms because, again, that kind of plays into a little bit of that kind of fetishy thing.
We're going to do the scene with Lee's car. So, it would be just like where, you know, where you're just parked underneath where he gave you a lift. Say, you know, thanks for picking me up after school. And say, oh yeah, sure.
Put right up on the bumper there.
Uh-huh.
You know, like that. If you find that the back tack's in your way, you can drop it at any time. all right?
No. I like the backpack. It's hot.
It's padding.
You know, so we can do that. We can do.
Good, you know, but the first memorable time when you actually were young and you actually enjoyed it, you actually liked the person.
Barely Legal's mission statement made me curious about Erica's own first times.
Whatever, it was just that, you know, he just thought that I had sex with my boyfriend, and I didn't. I was 13 years old.
13.
That was my first experience was not a good one.
Through Barely Legal, Erica seems to have found a profitable way to re-script the first time into something much more enjoyable. And she's doing it over and over again. The Virgin Marketplace isn't just selling porn fantasies, it's offering real bodies as well. Women all over the world have put their virginity up for auction to anyone with the money to buy it.
That's where I contacted Mr. Hoff of the Bunny Ranch, and that's the only legalized way to do it.
In the UK, a guy paid 18-year-old Rosie before and after. One single event that changes a woman's value forever. And that fantasy has controlled our lives long enough. The first guy that I had sex with only lasted one more date, which is fine. I've had a lot more pleasurable experiences since then. And all that experience helped me figure out exactly what I want now. Ed and I got married on a sunny day in my sister's garden. I chose a green and black dress with a big red flower in my hair. The groom wore brown. Ed and I walked hand in hand down the aisle together. And nothing was given away. My wedding day was really important to me. But getting married isn't the end of my story, any more than losing my virginity was the beginning of it.
It's as much of a benefit, I think, sometimes to have had partners before as it is to have had job experience before you have a job. You have things that you've learned, places you know you kind of screwed up a little. You've refined your communication skills, which is kind of the biggest thing with sex.
We've let myths and ideologies gain control of our thinking about sex rather than making it scientifically based and age appropriate. And I think that's something we've got to get back.
You're going to have sex, hopefully, I hope for you, in the way that is most pleasurable and most fulfilling for you at the time, which might not look like anything that any of your friends are doing.
There's gonna be a lot of like trial and error. I feel like, are you sure you still want to watch TV? Are you sure there's a CSI marathon on right now? I'm sure that's gonna be good. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted in the know. Teresa, I'm having sex right now. Yeah. I'll call you in 20 minutes. I mean, more like 7.
Sex and the IV was a personal project that kind of taken on a life of its own, and I wanted to use some of that energy to combat sex negative discourse. This conference has really allowed me to challenge the way we form our sexual ethics.
Most of the women that I know are neither virgins nor whores. That there's a whole rich stream of possibilities.
I'm a very passionate person. If I am to have a relationship, it would be so that eventually I would be married. We would be two that come together and be one.
It's like a perpetual spring for me, you know? I'm curious about so many things.
Funny to think about the church I grew up in. I'm pretty sure none of those people were virgins when they got married, if you want to be honest. It's almost as if my generation is the virginity generation.